Hello, I'm Jonathan Bowman-Perks, and welcome back to my favourite time of the week. And I'm really delighted to have on the series this week, Copeman. And Joe has just finished being the Managing Director for the UK Plus region, which is sort of UK and various other countries. But he's been doing two jobs. He's also been the Global Senior Vice President for Sales for Acast. And now, luckily, wise, he's focusing on one job and has hired a new person as MD. But this is a big job because they're in 12 to 13 countries. And Acast is the largest global podcast company. And since I'm fascinated by podcasting, I thought I'd get to the source and to the man who is running it all. So, Joe, over to you, really. Welcome. Great to have you on the series.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Tell us a little bit about Acast, just very briefly, in a little nutshell. Anything more that you could just add as just people who don't know about it, and then just a nutshell of the kind of firms that you've worked for since university.
Sure. So Acast is the largest global podcast company right now. We were founded in Sweden in 2014, and yeah, we have over 10,000 podcasts we represent now. And yeah, my role, as you say, has kind of moved on from what was a sales role to begin with when I first moved into the company to now being responsible for the sales in all markets we operate in.
Brilliant. And what about the different jobs? Because we had a discussion. I really enjoyed our chat to begin with. You were saying it was like doing a graduate scheme. You've worked in so many different areas of media production. Do you want to just say about post-university?
Yeah, sure. So I fell into media as my first job at Capital Radio when I was 21, and you know, media sales was good fun. You know, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the entertainment business. It kind of worked off the back of the degree I did, and since I came to work in radio sales at Capital Radio, I've been lucky enough to move from different media to different media. So there was Capital Radio, there was ITV, there was Pearl and Dean, so cinema, and Sky, so digital. So I always felt like I was doing an elongated, mature version of a graduate scheme, doing 3.5 years in different mediums, understanding and learning about that medium, with the hope or expectation that fate would deal me a card that it would all be for a reason. So when this opportunity came along from Acast, which I didn't, it was a brand new company. Podcasting wasn't really a thing six years ago. I thought, what's there to lose? Let's go for it. And since then, it's been an absolutely magical journey.
You were so lucky, or I don't know, you read the market to see how podcasting has become such a huge thing, and particularly with coronavirus, you must have seen the listening numbers ramp up. Have you got any kind of idea of how much it's increased?
It's changed in different markets. I mean, it's around an increase of between 5 and 10% in most markets, which has been phenomenal. The biggest difference has been the change in listening patterns. So people aren't listening on their way into work and their way out of work so much now. They start listening in the mornings, and it's pretty consistent throughout the day now. But people are coming to podcasts for different reasons. It's escapism. It's at the beginning it was to find out more about coronavirus. Now it's to escape coronavirus and kind of indulge in comedy, or there's a lot of educational listening going on now. Self-improvement. As I say, escapism, mental health, this sort of thing as well. So yeah, podcasts have massively taken off, and going back to 6 years when we started, podcasts arrived 11, 12 years ago, didn't really take off too much until the tech allowed us to kind of do more advanced, innovative things in podcasting, which was when Acast was launched, and we actually launched in the UK. The same week that a podcast called Serial launched. And that seems to be kind of the gateway podcast for many people. That's the first one I listened to. And since then, it's just grown and grown phenomenally.
Yeah. What is, in your opinion, give me some advice. I mean, here I am doing podcasts. I've only been in since September. We're on episode 56. What have you found has been the secret of really successful podcasters and podcasts?
one of the key ways that you become successful is why you get into podcasting. You know, from a sales point of view, we're here to make money for podcasters. But if a podcaster comes to us to get into podcasting to make money, that's the wrong reason. Yeah. You want to come into it because you have a really interesting story to tell. You've got a passion for it. You enjoy storytelling. People that come to us when they want to make a podcast to make money is not necessarily the right reason at all. And also, you know, there's so many different types of podcasts. Your classic podcasts are one-to-one interviews. Often they take place in studios. I've enjoyed podcasts a lot more now where these conversations take place elsewhere. It could be whilst walking a dog. It could be whilst doing something different. And you actually tend to get more from the interviewee when you're doing something at the same time, because they open up more. You're not sat over a desk looking each other in the eyes, so you can open up more. So, you know, the right interviewers. You know, I'm a big fan of people like Adam Buxton and people like that who do fantastic interviews. But you know, you have so many more interesting formats coming in now. Fictional storytelling, user-generated content where listeners are sending in stories and things like that. So, you know, we are awash of incredibly creative podcasters right now. It's exciting time.
Fantastic. Well, I will keep working and learning from the others as I listen to. And in Acast, you know, Austin was the one who recommended you, and I only have hosts. I only host people, guests. Thank you, on podcasts who've been recommended by other people. I have people. I'd like to be on your podcast. Thank you, but actually, I need people to say you're an inspiring leader to be here. People say you're an inspiring leader. And you've created a really interesting culture at Acast. Certainly in the team, you know, you have about 55 people that have been working there, albeit everybody's now working from home during the pandemic. But, you know, happy that they find it their best job. And that comes from, we'll talk later on about your tennis and your sporting prowess. But as you've learned about being an inspiring leader yourself, who do you look back on who inspired you, and what qualities did they have? Perhaps you might mention a couple of people.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to work with some incredible managers in my time, and equally as fortunate to work with some terrible managers at the same time.
We'll talk about that in a moment.
Because you learn as much from both of them. You know, my first manager at Capital Radio, a guy called Mark, he was fantastic. You know, I learned many skills from him.
Such as what practical things could leaders do? People who are listening think about being a good manager. What
I think from him, there's some many great techniques, sales techniques, negotiation techniques, and also getting the best out of a team and feeling really driven. I think, yeah, the drive he kind of empowered you to have was, as part of a team, was quite a great skill.
Yeah,
I learned from him. Again, at Pearl and Dean, had a manager called Mike Copeman, and again, you know, I learned heaps from him. I mean, he was a hugely warm, likable guy who would, you know, he would be the centre of a room, but again, would always, you know, never take himself too seriously. You know, he had a presence about him as well, and would always protect you. I remember one time in particular where we had a campaign running for Nivea, and I'd made a mistake. And, you know, we went in to face the clients in the room, and, you know, knowing he had my back the whole time was hugely helpful and supportive. So, yeah, I took that from him as well.
It's nice when leaders take bullets for people. And also you have leaders who are what I would call toxic and narcissistic, self-driven, egotistical, sort of Donald Trump type characters, larger than life. So when you work for those ones, what's the watch out for people when they've got certain traits in a leader? As I say, if you've got a narcissist, personality disorder person, or what I call a white collar psychopath, emigrate to avoid them. I mean, you know, you can't change them, so you have to get away from them. But if you are working for someone, what are the signs that you should watch out for? Because you work for some bad ones too.
Yeah, I think, you know, any leader who doesn't recognise where work stops and life starts is a poor leader. You know, every leader needs to understand that different people have different backgrounds, different lifestyles, and they need to be able to shut away from work from time to time. So I think that's an expectation that is unfair to have on any member of staff. And then you have, leaders again who have obvious favourites, but I don't necessarily mind, a leader who gets on better with some people than someone else necessarily. But when you do so and don't listen to other people as much, or show that you are open to other people's ideas as much, that's not cool. And I think
I remember in the military having an instructor who was, and in his case, he would be biased towards the regiment, the cap badge, as we call it, that you were from, that it was more prestigious, and therefore, if it was a prestigious Guards or cavalry regiment, he'd listen to them. But if you were in one of the technical corps, that was a bit less trendy. Of course, now it's the other way around. But and so it was almost a one-upmanship sort of class structure, and he would give bias to people that way. And I remember pinning him behind a door once when everyone else had left and say, "You just can't do this. You've got to give people it based on merit." It really grated me. And then what about, you talked about other leaders who get it wrong, but I'm sure you're like me that you make many mistakes and still keep learning from them. What about the mistakes that you've made and what you learned from them, and how that would help other people, that they don't have to make the same blunders that you made?
Yeah, I mean, that's where you learn most, I think, where you make mistakes. And, at Acast, when we first, started in October 2014, no one had bought a podcast before. So I've said this before, and I'll say it again, for the first, we had to make it up as we went along, because no one had done this before. No one was out there doing podcasts en masse as a network. So, we had to think, what are we selling? How do we price it? How do we sell it? And sure, we got things wrong, whether it's pricing or whether it's other ways of, working with the podcaster and the advertiser together. But, those are the areas you learn more at. You accelerate your learning, and therefore your success by I think, when things go wrong, and you can adapt.
Yeah, and also the other thing which I think is interesting is that as well as the decisions we make mistakes with, there's also the behavior, because you pride yourself on caring for people, and you told me you got a real great buzz when people are happy and they find this is the best job they've ever done, and the culture, which is the way things are done around here, which is often set by the MD in your case, is healthy. When have you, as a leader, maybe in the early days or maybe recently, we all make mistakes recently, when have you got it wrong in the way you handled people, and what have you learned about how to handle people better?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if I could look at one thing I'm probably guilty of as a leader, it's always becoming too friendly with people. I think you need to be able to have that line where no matter how friendly you are, there's a line to cross. And I don't think necessarily I would cross it towards the people of the team. I think that because I like to give off a very friendly environment, they always feel they can, reveal too much, or just go, or treat suddenly. There are no barriers, and it's almost like a anything goes kind of thing. And this could be on a team night out, for example, or whatever, where something might happen, and you think actually that's not okay. If I was your friend and we were out for a night at the weekend, fine. But I, as your manager, it's hard, because there's an occasion where you have to kind of take action if something would happen like that. And I always say that's not necessarily their fault, it's my fault, because I probably gave the impression that I was more a mate of theirs than necessarily a manager. So I think that's possibly, and I think I wouldn't be the only one to be guilty of that. And I'm sure.
Yeah, let's stay with that, because I think that's a very interesting point. And I found that I got this occasionally wrong as a young officer in the army, where try and go for popularity rather than respect. Mm-hmm. And people wouldn't know, because you were making the boundaries very relaxed. They would take advantage of them. A bit like I'm about to get a puppy in a few weeks' time, about 7 weeks' time, and it's going to need some boundaries. because otherwise chaos will reign, and it needs to know what goes on. But I'm not saying that people like puppies and we're training them that, but it's just that as humans, we've got to have freedom within a framework, some kind of framework with freedom, but yet also fun. And you were talking about your love of fun and really enjoying it. And from a man who used to set up raves and get things going, you've always enjoyed living life to the full. How do you ensure there's enough fun, but yet there's a bit of framework within the fun so they don't abuse it?
I think, firstly, who doesn't want to be popular? I think everyone likes to be popular with people around them. It makes the whole environment the best it can be. When you, I think, become a better leader, you need to understand that you can't always be popular with every decision you make. You'll need to make decisions that will affect some people in a negative way. It's how you address that and how honest and open you are with them, and how you back that up with the context and the reason. I think so long as you do that, you'll still have their full respect, no matter what the decision might be. I think that's one thing I've learned from, again, very, very good managers, and I'd say that about our CEO now. It's learning that you can't always make a decision that will please everyone. And
just stay with your CEO, and before we go on to talk about qualities that you admired in him, and you've worked with him for a while now, you remind me of the point that the why, the purpose. When you give people a why and a reason for something, and people have meaning and purpose in the work they do, and they know why they're doing the work, they can cope with any what or how. Remember from Goethe, the philosopher, he who has a clear burning why can cope with any what or how. Let's go on to your CEO, and just tell us who he is and really qualities that you admire in him.
So our CEO is Ross Adams. I worked with Ross actually in my very first job out of uni at Capital Radio. And he took a similar career path to me, except he went from Capital Radio to Spotify and basically set up Spotify here in the UK, and then the European sales function. And then he was the one who first kind of found out about Acast. There was some people who had been involved with Spotify who set up Acast. So he was kind of brought in for that, and he brought me in the UK. And he's someone who he's got many great qualities. First of all, the ability to get on with everyone. He can be, the centre of attention in a room, but he also has an incredibly calming influence on people around him. When the chips are down or when there's a high pressure situation, he has ability to, assure people and for them to be calm. And I think that's and again, when he's having flack thrown at him from, it might be any situation, a board meeting or whatever. He is very good at reacting to questions and providing good, coherent, well thought out answers.
Yeah, that's great. And what, from your experience of working with him and other leaders and your own practical thing, what would you give us as your first top tip about being an inspiring leader? People that you've worked with who you found inspiring. What practical thing can people do?
Honestly, it's the first thing I like to think about is that a good leader can, make fun of themselves. And poke fun at themselves. I think that will immediately get away any kind of barriers, I think, in terms of, I'm your manager, you report into me. And it means that straight away I think it's a very likable thing to be able to do. So I think the ability to poke fun at oneself, and also but when I bring people into a team, the thing I want to do is not just necessarily put them into a role and hope they have the right skills for it. I'll bring someone in and I will, work closely with them to understand what their best skills are. And hopefully within 4 or 5 weeks, you have a true picture of how, where their best areas are. And I want these people to be the very best version of themselves they can be. And it might be that, you ask them to do different aspects of a job, or it might be there's a different job on the horizon, which you think actually that could be a very good position for this person. So it really is trying to empower them to be the very best version of themselves they can be.
Great tip. And one of the things I find, one of the psychometrics that I encourage leaders to use is one that around what drives and motivates them, but also what drives and motivates their team. And when the leader takes it and then the team takes it, the leader can actually understand what gets the best out of his people, because they love doing those kind of things. Doesn't mean they are necessarily doing them, but then he knows what's behind that person, that man or woman, what gives them fulfillment and satisfaction. We guess at it, but actually until you get someone else to do it, you're really in the dark. So that's one technique I would encourage, to use a useful psychometric that is their opinion of themselves, what drives and motivates them, but what gives them fulfillment, satisfaction, happiness. And then feeding back into what you said about culture, happiness, enjoying the job, then you can give them projects and things that they love doing. You talked about poking fun at yourself, and yeah, I sometimes in the past have got it wrong by taking myself far too seriously, and lighten up, and I'm working on that all the time, work in progress. I think someone said to me, we are the incomplete leader, leading the complete team. You try and get a good team who are metaphorically giants, taller than you in their specialist areas, but having a great team means that you don't work as hard. But what would you, talk about poking fun, what stories come to mind of when there's been tense moments and someone's lightened it by a good bit of humor, or something's gone badly wrong and everybody's laughed about it and not taken it too seriously?
Oh, there can be all sorts. It can be tech problems on important calls. It can be a dog running into a studio at the wrong time at Acast. We have our 2 or 3 dogs that we have and very much love there as well. I mean, there's all sorts of fun and laughter that happen at the Acast office the whole time, and you rarely get a situation where there's anything too serious going on where you need these things to help out. But I mean, I think one of my favorite memories actually was in our 3rd office, I think, and we had we're only 50, no, I think there's 13 or 14 of us at that point, and we had to do a presentation because we're shortlisted for Media Week Sales Team of the Year, and there were about 5 or 6 of us from the sales team, but the other guys there were ad operations, or basically in jobs that had never had to present to people before. And we had the judges came in at one point, and there were about an equal number of judges to were people in our entire company in the office. And our whole thing was we were talking about who we are, what we did, how we contributed to what Acast managed to achieve. And that morning, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. Everyone was in their own corners of the company, rehearsing their few lines. It was so nervous, and everyone came together, and the judges sat down in their 2 or 3 rows of seats. We all got to the front, and we talked through what we did, and it went as well as it possibly could be. Sure, a couple of sentences went wrong, but it was fantastic. I think the judges could see how much it meant to everyone. The other people we're up against were people like Channel 4 and ITV and huge media companies who are well-oiled machines, and here was 14 people, many of which you can't present. And I just remember when the judges left the building. We all came together for this massive hug. This was pre-coronavirus times, and I think went to the pub after that. But yeah, that was one time that it was just an incredible situation where you saw people really come together in a way that you rarely see. So that was very special. Yeah,
that's grand. Now, I'm really interested by leaders and the lives that they've lived, and how that's shaped the people they are. And people always love stories and the real side of people. From how they grew up. Now, you've had a fascinating upbringing, and parents who've loved and supported you. You're one of 4, and also you were sent away at 14 to a tennis training school, and also got involved, I think, at that young age in some of the top championships with some famous names. Do you want to begin with perhaps starting to talk about that and who influenced you early in your life into the leader you are today? And just give us a little bit of a taster through that, just a bit of a gamble through that quickly.
Sure, yeah. I was very fortunate to be able to play a lot of tennis when I was a kid. I love sport. I absolutely love sport. And tennis was one that my parents, I was very grateful. They put me through lots of training with coaches and so on. I used to play county tennis, regional tennis, national tennis, and so on. And I got to the age of 14. And at this point, I was still planning on being a professional tennis player. That was my life all mapped out. And it got to the point where I was, at a school in Norwich, and I was becoming restless with that. I was thinking that school life wasn't necessarily for me anyway, and I was getting into a bit of trouble. And I saw tennis as the way out. So, the school probably were quite happy at that point to see me choose to move away from the school, should we say. My dad was a governor, so I think he was quite relieved as well. I went off.
But also, you did share that the school closed down a year after you left. So it had its problems, didn't it?
So, the school that closed down was the actual tennis school I went to. So I went to this tennis school in Watford. And, I was staying in a boarding unit where the other kids, they had dads in the Scottish Army. I was playing.
It would be a rough lot. From my experience of the Scottish Army, that would be.
We were having to barricade ourselves in rooms. There were fights every night. It was a hideous place. That was where I stayed at night time. I was doing 3 GCSEs in a sixth form college in Hendon, London, and every afternoon I was playing. I think it was 3.5 hours tennis and an hour's fitness, and that was 6 days a week. And that was age 14. So it was a crazy part of my life, and I was away from my parents for the first time ever. So it was quite lonely as well. I was doing all this tennis, and I played the Orange Bowl, which was the World Championships in Miami.
Wow.
And the tournament literally the week before that with the same people, I got to the last 8, and I was thinking, here we go, this is it. I'm on par with these guys. I can do it. Sadly, I got knocked out in the first round. The main one, as soon as my dad came over to watch. But I did, you mentioned famous names. I did go out to dinner with Anna Kournikova, aged 11 at that point. I was aged 14, with our coaches. It wasn't just the 2 of us. But that was a kind of a life-changing moment, because I went over there, and when I was there, I was already starting to feel rebellious, and I could see the other tennis hopefuls. All they'd be doing their stretches and exercises, and I was wanting to go off and explore and get up to no good. And I kind of realised that I didn't have the mentality to be a top tennis player, because you need to be so straight-laced, so focused on one thing and one thing only. And I wanted more from life than
almost obsessive, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And that wasn't for me. So,
but didn't you find also, and I've suffered from this myself, in that I've been with very high caliber people who end up in the SAS and became generals and things. And I was both competitive and comparative, which is a really horrendous combination, because you drive yourself very hard and then constantly hard on yourself. And you were in the same kind of situation, highly competitive, sporting, and comparative, because only one person can be number one. That must have been quite hard.
But it was hard. And I think that the thing for me was that at the realization that it wasn't the life for me, having seen how much time and money my parents had poured into me, giving me the chance to be this tennis player, I didn't want to have to phone them and say, I want out. So I ended up at that point in my career, was, I think it was January, February time. In fact, it was my mum's birthday. Yeah, I remember going into Watford and getting up to no good. I remember having, taking on quite a bit of alcohol illegally. Obviously, I was only 14. And taking 1 or 2 things from shops that I wasn't allowed to do, and one thing led to another, and before you knew it, I was chucked out of that school. And that for me was a moment that was, suddenly there's this big gap in my life. I was always destined to be this tennis player, and I just let my parents down, and that void was then there. So that for me was a real, a dark period for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And knowing what you know now about, being away at a tough boarding school, but also the intensity that parents' expectations can put on children. You've got children of your own too. What sort of age are they, and what have you learned about children that you wouldn't do to your own children?
Yeah, good point. I've got Matilda, who's 12, and Monty, who's 9. And I would, I'd love for them to do the same kind of sports and everything I do, but I've learned that they're not me. I look at both of them, and as soon as you realise that they're just not passionate about it, you can't push them. The more you push them, the more they'll resist against it. So that's one thing for me. And despite I'd love to be playing tennis or whatever sports with these guys, if they're not into it, they'd rather do something different, something more creative, then great, empower them to do that.
Yeah. So a couple of schools that you got asked to leave politely. I think the other term is expelled from. Lessons that you learned about life really at a very early age, very competitive, thought that was one route for you, but then it turned out to be a completely different one. But I like the fact that you self-motivated and thought, crikey, I'm now out of the school, but I'm going to have to do this myself. Talk to me about that, because I love that kind of.
Yeah, sure. So after tennis school, it was onto GCSEs and A levels, and this was the school that I met my wife at. And again, it got to the very start of the first term of A levels. And again, things didn't work out at school, and I left. And so I then had the whole term to essentially teach myself, because I wasn't going to school anymore. So I had the textbooks, so I'd do the homework. I'd get up at 9, work till 5. Some of the teachers still were happy to mark my work and provide me feedback, which was great. It was like this black market of school markings going between my girlfriend and the teachers and coming back to me. And yeah, sure, I did much better in those exams than I was predicted to do, because finally I felt like I was working for myself rather than just working for these teachers who I didn't really have any respect for. So yeah, that was really, really useful. So I did my A levels, got good enough grades to get into university. Had a gap year before I went there, and had a fantastic time at university. And again, having had been through quite a few experiences in the past few years, when I got to university, I was quite content to, whilst enjoying myself and going out and still having fun, actually I was more motivated to crack on and actually work there. So I'd get up in the morning while everyone else was lying in bed, and I'd do a whole day's work, and then go out in the evening with them as well. So whereas a lot of my other friends were probably, who hadn't had necessarily so many experiences, were finding themselves at university. I think that I'd gone through that phase of my life already by that point.
I think this comes up time and again, and the importance of having maturity when you're doing something, and to do things when you're still got stuff in the system you've got to get out of you. I remember going to Sandhurst aged 18. I was compared to my colleagues who were there. Some had been corporals and served in the army already. They had so much more maturity. I really, in many ways, I did okay, but I just didn't have that level of maturity. And you did the same. You took the gap year, you'd had different experiences. So it really meant something to you, and you came out with it first, which was exceptional. So well done for that. I think that's a lesson for us about getting sufficient experience. You can never, one of the guys I was talking to, Brigadier Jim Richardson, he said, training people and developing people is really important. You can never overdevelop people. You need that experience and life experiences. The guys I'm going to be recording soon, Colonel Gary Hearn. I mean, he began as a private soldier in the army, went to the Falklands War as a corporal, then got commissioned as an officer. But he had all that experience before he even went to Sandhurst. He had that maturity, and I think you getting that maturity is important. We're coming towards the end of our time, but a couple of things I'd be interested in before we sort of end with some tips in your future development plans. Is what about a dark time in your life in the last few years? What was that dark time? What was a really tough time for you? What did you learn from it? How has it shaped you as a leader?
I mean, I'm lucky enough not to have particularly any dark times in the last few years. I would, I'd probably say it was around the time of before going to university and getting all that trouble. That was probably the darkest period. I think more than anything, it was knowing you'd let people down. That's one of the things I fear most. It was parents. It was people who looked after you. The fear that you've let them down. That was probably the darkest times. So the ability to pay people back, I think giving them something back was always something I wanted to do, and I feel that having kind of hopefully turned into what Mum will now describe as nice guy Joe is something that I'm really proud of, actually. So I think those would probably be the darkest times. As I say, I'm lucky that in the last few years, I've had an amazing time at Acast. I'm lucky with a fantastic family around me. So no, I never take anything for granted. And yeah, I'd always look out to try and be the best version of me I can be, and help other people, and always understand that whilst I might not be going through a dark time, others will be, and where I can possibly spot that and where I possibly can help that, for me that's a hugely important thing, and something I always like to do wherever I can.
Great. So last couple of questions. Book what would be a book you're reading now or you've read recently about self-development that you found useful, or a podcast you listen to? You could, one of each perhaps.
Yeah, I laugh at this actually. I'm going to talk about a podcast I listened to yesterday, one of our new podcasts by Ross Kemp, formerly Sender. I've just found that fascinating. Some of the stories, he's a well-known broadcaster, doing investigative journalism, that sort of thing. And some of the stories that he raised from people who have had to go off and do the most incredible jobs, drug law enforcement and all this sort of thing. I find that extremely interesting to listen to. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about your final top tip that you'd leave us with before you talk about your future development plans, how you're going to develop yourself?
Top tips, I think, treat others how you want to be treated. It's a really simple motto, but it's always resonated well with me. Don't take yourself too seriously. We have 3 values at Acast that, are exactly what Acast is about. They are, fueled by passion. So be as passionate as you can. If you're not passionate about what you do, if you can, try and find something you're passionate to do. Be open and caring. Be transparent. I think everyone does things for the right reason, for sure. It might be that you don't understand other people's reasons for doing it, but there always will be a reason behind it. And the last one, curious and brave. I think I love being around people who are curious about what they're up to, and they're curious about the world around them, and people who are brave, who are willing to take risks. Risk takers, I think, are people who tend to have the more amusing stories to listen to and the more inspiring people. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then finally, what are you going to do to develop yourself as a leader? Right? What's your plans for the next year?
Listen to feedback. Always listen to feedback from others around me. And most of that I find is better coming from people I manage necessarily than people more senior than myself. But yeah, it's taking it on board with the right context, understanding why they're saying that. Where I am right now, Acast is, I feel extremely privileged to be here. I think the journey we're on, we're 6 years in, but it feels like podcasting is still, going to grow and grow and grow. And it's about, for myself personally, understanding more about different aspects of business. I think the whole, funding and acquisition and that part of business, going beyond my sales management, I'd like to understand more about that side of business, values of companies, this sort of thing as well. So I'd like to learn more about that for sure.
Great. Well, Joe Copeman, thank you very much indeed, having you on the Inspiring Leadership series. Really enjoyed your stories and keep doing the great work. And I look forward to hearing how it goes. So, Joe, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.